Hi everybody, Andrew here. Just to let you know, Sven is here with me in London this weekend. We're just going through some global coordination stuff. Yeah, enjoying our first proper meeting, which is pretty cool. Jacques and Roxanne, do you want to take over from here? I think what we'll do is after the questions that we've sent you this morning, we'll open up the room to open mic so that people can ask questions directly this time. It's a request that's come through this morning, so we'll give that a bash.
Sounds good. Okay, so Jacques, you said that there won't be police, but if there are people that can't be controlled, say murder, rape, violence, who will control these people?
During the transition, we will have, people will have multi-functions. In other words, during the transition, we will have people surveying. Everybody in the training program will be able to act as what you call police during the transition. After the transition, after the establishment of the Venus Project, people will have multi-function, meaning everybody will be a safety engineer. Everybody will participate in preventing any disruptive behavior or dealing with it. Do you know what that means? Everybody will be multifunctional. You don't need a special force of police.
How do you deal with it? How do you deal with murder, rape, violence during the transition anyway?
During the transition, we have to incarcerate people only during the transition. And if we can free them sooner, we will.
Will there be training that time, or what do you do with
I answered. No.
Okay. To what extent of population number can we okay, I guess he's saying up to what number in the population can we create an abundance? When does it become problematic after that?
I don't think it becomes problematic. I think we have about 7 billion now, and I think that we will reduce the population in the future to education only.
In a resource-based economy, will people be able to travel constantly all over the world and have shelter and food everywhere they go, including the seaside areas during summer times?
Yes.
Would people still have titles like doctor, Mr., manager in a resource-based economy? And would schools still have levels such as first and second grade, freshman, junior?
One question at a time. What's
Okay.
the first one?
Would people still have titles such as doctor, manager?
Yes.
So people will be called Mr. and Doctor?
Yes. They will be called doctor, chief engineer, assistant engineer, whatever profession they are, agronomist, but they won't be addressed as agronomists. They'll be addressed by their name during the transition and from a short time into the transition.
So eventually the titles will be eliminated. Eventually, is that what you're saying?
No. The titles will not be eliminated.
Would that set up antagonism between people?
No.
Would schools still have levels like first and second grade,
No.
freshman, elementary, middle school?
No, people move as rapidly as they can from one grade to the other. If a 13 or 14-year-old is ready for college, he goes to college. There is no, you don't stay in a classroom for some scheduled time. If you're ready to move, you move.
You said there'll be no competition in the future and that there may be computer simulated sports where one plays a computer.
One plays against an image of themselves, and the image of themselves picks up the acuity and rapidity so that you can improve your judgment and estimations of how to use a tennis racket or whatever it is. It improves your judgment, your eyesight, everything else. But it's not a competitive game. It's competing against your own statistical data.
Will there be rankings on who performs the fastest, jumps the highest, like the Guinness World
No,
Record?
there's no sports. Sports is not emphasized. If you want to do that on your own time, you can jump over anything you want to jump over. But people are not pitted against one another.
Okay, this is kind of repetition. You said that there will no longer be grading in the Venus Project. How does one determine how competent someone is in a subject in school?
By their performance. In other words, after the training or after the exposure to education, they are then tested in the field, always in reality. No, the written exams will be accompanied by performance tests. Their judgment, their ability to, on the spot, make decisions, all that will be tested just as they are today. Performance testing only.
Okay, how would children move from one grade to another? Are there grades? I think
No,
you said that
I
already.
answered that.
Yes, you did. And then it said, how do you prevent jealousy, envy without grades? It seems jealousy and envy correlates with the grading. You know, if somebody
Yes.
gets an A and somebody gets a D, there's jealousy and envy.
Yes.
In regards to jobs, Jacques said that there would be a survey committee, that there would be agricultural branch doctors, technicians. Who determines who gets to work at those specific branches and committees? Who determines who will work in the agricultural belt or the different
The same way
technical
it's done
branches?
today. Somebody submits a background sheet of their ability to perform, which is done at the schools. And if the background sheet is substantiated, they perform.
If there's competition for jobs like those roles listed above, how do you prevent cheating?
I don't know what it is. There's no competition for jobs.
Okay.
There's no competition for jobs. People are assigned different performances, depending on their background and capability. They are assigned work, such as aviation design, highway systems, transportation experts. People are assigned tasks. They don't go into an office and begin to perform. They are assigned just as it is today.
If somebody has a position to do something that takes more knowledge or more understanding or more time to learn certain things, they're not rewarded any more so than anybody else. There's no prizes if you contribute something. There's no reason to want to achieve for gaining anything. There would really be no reason to want to cheat. The reason you participate is to improve life and improve lives for other people. If you can't do that, you would step aside if somebody else can handle something or has more knowledge in a certain area, or they would share that knowledge. But there's no gain from that, so people would want to cheat to gain a certain position. There's no reinforcement in terms of anything that you get that's more than anybody else. If somebody, for example, starts killing, this is a similar question, and there's no police, prisons to determine that to detain that individual.
I said during the transition, yes.
Who makes the decision to stop this person? Yeah.
During the transition, there are authorities that would help prevent any further destruction.
But people aren't mistreated either. They're not put in jail or beaten, or they're really they try and help people.
Rob, can I just say something on that one quickly?
Sure, go ahead.
Highly recommend to anyone that sort of has questions about the sort of law and crimes and things in a resource-based economy to read the books by James Gilligan on violence and preventing violence, to get an idea of the way treatment of such criminals and violent criminals, etc., would be dealt with within a resource-based economy. It's a very different sort of outlook as to what the current methods are of restraining people and basically diminishing their life, or diminishing their way of life to a point where they're less than human, and that's something that will be hugely different in a resource-based economy. And the idea is that eventually that we grow out of the causes, the generators of those behaviours, so that you don't actually end up with those problems in your society. So it's only really during a transition that you're going to have these problems where those existing values and those existing issues of our current culture play out in a criminal or sort of illegal way, as you'd reference it today, really.
That's correct, Andrew.
Yes, once you start giving children, different types of values of how to look at things, and they'll have very different behavior.
Yes.
I think this person is asking the same type of question. There'll still be relationship problems no matter what, especially during the transition. How are these resolved? How are the relationship problems resolved during the transition?
During the transition, people are given the necessary information to handle problems themselves, and they test it for it. And if they're qualified to do that, they enter into the performance field.
He's talking about relationship problems. There'll still be relationship problems during the transition.
I don't see that.
During the transition?
During the transition, yes.
Yes. This person is asking if they can donate to the city. No, I think it's too early for that to take donations to the city.
The person's a multi-millionaire.
Yes,
they can.
Yeah, that's true. But it would take really too much to start giving small donations towards the city.
Personally, I believe we can do that through government, existing government. When the government begins to break down, only at that time will they call upon us to evaluate our methods.
Were there other questions? That's all we had for the questions. So if there's anybody that wants to ask a question, is that how you want to handle it this time, Andrew?
Sven's going to jump in now and just sort of briefly go over how this is going to be moderated. So I'll just pass it over to him now.
Right. Hello, everyone. So we're going to do it a bit different today. And for those that are actually willing to ask a question, even though your microphones are muted, you will be able, by right-clicking on your name, to request talk power. This will pop up a little window and asking for a reason for that talk power. And just give a really short explanation, like 2 to 3 words of what you're about to ask, and then you will be granted talk power, and you can then present your questions to Jack and Roxanne, so it will be answered. So initially I'll start out asking some of the questions that were sent to me, because either the person was unwilling to speak or is unable to, or just doesn't have a microphone. So the first one is, again, on digital copies of the book, The Best That Money Can't Buy, whether Roxanne and Jack know about iBook Author. If not, they should look into that as soon as possible, because it makes it very easy to make a version and reach many, many people. Have you heard of that, Roxanne and Jack?
Well, we already have somebody that we're working with who is turning The Best That Money Can't Buy into a book for Kindle and these other groups that put the books out there like that. So we are in the process of doing that. I can't say exactly when it will be up, because it's just not up to us entirely.
Right. The next question refers back to Jack's lecture sessions from the 70s and 80s. And there he talks about building a tolerance to up to 16 bullshit events a day. Has he increased that number? And what steps did he take to build this tolerance?
Yes.
What?
That was a fictitious number.
It was just for an example of
What's the question?
Well, that was just an example of how to kind of regulate how you feel yourself and what you can take during the day and when you stop taking on.
That must have been a very long time ago.
It was. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have Champ willing to voice a question again in regards to the iBook Author.
Yeah, good day to everybody. Yeah, the thing about iBook Author that's new. Basically, it's really easy to create books that can go into the iBook store. The downside is that it only works on Apple devices. The good thing is that it's really easy to create a book and add content to it. If there are things wrong and it's just distributed, it only takes one update and everybody has a new version. And well, I was working on the clothing line design, but if Jacques and Roxanne find it a good plan to put me on the creating a digital version of the book, then I would be happy to assist with that.
Thank you. Can you just drop me an email at meadows@thevenusproject.com? It's MEADOWS at thevenusproject.com. Because the person who's doing the iBook and the Kindle and the other processes that's out there that they have to get the books out, they're also doing many other things. They put up Designing the Future, and they're talking about doing up many other things. So they're not just handling that one book, but drop me an email and I'll be glad to talk to you about it.
I will do that.
Thanks.
Right. Another questions. Are there any other old pieces of film, media, or lectures which are yet to be released? For example, anything which is similar to the old lecture series?
Yes, we have a lot of them. And somebody just got in touch with us. They had a reel-to-reel tape recorder that they put a lot of old tapes on from I think several years earlier than when we have our tapes, and they have over 100 hours. So we're just beginning to get those as well. It's just there are only 2 people here doing all that, and it's just finding time because we just finished a documentary too, and there are certain priorities. So, but we will be getting more information from the old lectures out. They're really excellent.
And also, you might want to say something about the release of your new documentary.
Oh, sure. We have an hour-long documentary that we just finished. Somebody's putting music onto it for us. And we're going to be putting it up there for free on the internet and maybe charging just a small amount to cover costs for those who want it on CD. I can't say when we're going to have it up there because it depends on the person who's doing the music, but he's working really quickly. Maybe in a couple of weeks, I hope. I'm sure you'll watch for that. It's really an introduction to the Venus Project.
And it also picks up a lot of those questions that are continuously asked, and especially during the seminars. So you will see that as a good resource and a good educational resource aside from all the other material we provide. Next question would be, if people were absolutely informed about the Venus Project and want to start it, why do you say there are going to be messy, perturbed times, confusion, and wars? I think that person is asking about the transition and why it's going to be a hard time.
Well, it would be wonderful if people were rational and reasonable and you could just talk to them about the Venus Project and they would pick it up and understand it and do it, but we're not at that stage in evolution. Right now, introducing this to people is the most important thing, and helping them understand these values and the reasons for this direction and the detrimental effects of the monetary system. For certain people to understand this and understand the relevance, the ones that are highly invested in the monetary system and are gaining from it, it will take some personal pain for them to go through to see that it's not working for themselves. They're not really interested in other people in order for it to change. So it really takes getting information out there now, movies, books, videos, whatever we can do to introduce this direction and show that it's a more positive direction.
That's all right. That area deals with the educational process of how to do it, how to accomplish it. When that time comes, we will train people in specific areas and specific problems during the transition. They will be able to handle problems that will occur, which are typical. They're always the same problems. Egotism, people that have been heavily indoctrinated in the military would have to be treated differently. They think in terms of defense, which isn't the problem. The problems are how to relate to one another and other nations. Nations don't, if individuals and nations, if people don't have adequate training in how to change people, they don't engage in that activity. People with specific training in how to change the views of national leaders, they will have specific training in that area. That's the closest we can come to turning people around to a different point of view. Get this again, without specific training, they cannot accomplish this. We will offer that training during the transition and before the transition.
Well, this is what's really happening now. You're giving
Yes.
training, and
Those groups that meet are to discuss chapter by chapter of the book until the whole book has been completed for the group, so that the group understands the procedural systems of the Venus Project.
yes, the more information you can get, the old lectures, the newer lectures, all that helps.
Right, here's another question. That person is under the impression that Chuck thinks everything is caused by the value system and the environment. And as a homosexual, he's of the belief that it is not only caused by the environment, but he's asking whether there are any psychological ingrained things that cause these. And if there are, what are those?
No, I don't. I think that the environment shapes that.
In terms of homosexuality,
In terms of homosexuality,
is there anything that's inborn?
I don't believe so.
In terms of values, they're asking. Yeah.
No, nothing. Every word you use, all the facial expressions, look at people and watch how they reflect their culture. It's so obvious that nobody can come up with the development of language without working with other people, without making similar sounds. The sounds we make, Daddy, I want a Coca-Cola, I want a bar of chocolate. Everything a kid asks for is part of the culture. There's never anybody, never been a Chinese baby born speaking Chinese without learning it. No matter how many generations of speaking Chinese have passed, a child always has to go back to school and learn the ABCs of that system.
Do you want to speak a bit about sexual preferences and how that's arrived at, or anything like that?
No, because that isn't a question. I believe if people identify with a certain gender, they have to identify with it, and that's the aspect they love. Some people want to be a cowboy. Some people want to be an airline pilot. Some people want to be an engineer. All that is offered by the environment. They have to know what engineers do, what pilots do, airplane pilots. They have to know what doctors do. And then when the child or the adult or the younger kid decides he wants to be a doctor, we have to put him in a medical environment. That's what a university is. The university is an environment that talks a great deal about the procedures of medicine. If he wants to be an engineer, we put him in an engineering environment where he gets to test things, he gets to understand the procedural system of engineering. No child is ever born an engineer. He can read books and become an engineer, but he has to be put in an environment, or he has to be subjected to the books or information form as an engineer.
It might be more easily understood for educational systems like that, but for sexual preferences, can you describe how that comes about? How it's...
Well, sexual preferences comes about by a person identifying with a certain sex. And if they don't identify with it, in other words, if you have a father that beats your mother and you're a young girl, you may hate men. You may turn all your attention and warmth toward women if your father is a symbol that you don't identify with. I hope you understand what that means. If you are with a group of people and all the short people behave a certain way, you'll always turn to short people for information.
It's a long, slow serial development. You know, it's not just one thing that generates a value system or preferences in your life, and that could even be changing throughout your life. You know, it's like what determines people to become heterosexual. You can manipulate sexual preferences to anything if you're growing up and you push certain things.
Just like you train soldiers to become killing machines. Why do they kill people they don't even know? They know nothing about the other culture they're fighting. As a rule, they behave automatically as their culture determines what they will be. A bombardier, a navigator, all those things are trained. There doesn't appear to be any kind of natural inclination toward sexual preference. It appears to be based upon experience. It appears to be based upon the image that you put forth. If the person does not identify with that image for whatever reasons, this alters their values. If they find that the army is painful, they dislike anything related to the army. If they find that the army rewards their behavior, which the army does, if you shoot down more airplanes than another person, you get a medal. As long as they reinforce the behavior, you can get humans to do anything at all. They can hate Filipinos, Jews, Swedes, Englishmen, Frenchmen. It depends on the orientation you put them in. But if a person is oriented in the scientific method, they always say, I don't know, and they look into it, and they do experiments to determine their values. You don't form values without experimentation. That's the major difference between the Venus Project and all other systems.
Right, here's another question. Could you elaborate on what you mean by people will be assigned as far as work occupations are concerned in a resource-based economy?
People will be assigned projects as they are today. If you want a bridge built, you have to get bridge engineers together. If you want an automotive system or a transportation system, you bring transportation engineers together. That has nothing to do with the public in general. We assign people. Who do you assign to repair your refrigerator? A refrigeration competent person. When your electronic equipment breaks down, you don't take it to the butcher shop. You don't take it to a baker. You take it to a repair group that's capable of doing that. We will have those groups established.
And that's determined by the people who do surveys to know what we have are in order to feed, house, clothe, make a constructive educational system, make a constructive environment. The Venus Project has an agenda and has a direction. It's different than today's direction. And in order to fulfill that direction, then you take a survey and then you have to assign different people to fulfill those needs that people have.
You don't take an aeronautical engineer and have him design a city. That's not his field. But in the future, people will be classified as being well qualified in each successive profession. So you can call upon them. But when there's a problem that is outside of the known areas, that's called the Special Contingencies Department. It's comprised of people that are generalists. that can handle a wide range of problems. You have to have all these different organizations established so that you can assign them different jobs. In other words, meteorologists that deal with the weather. And if you have any questions regarding that, the answers can only come from, that is, answers that more nearly qualify to the actual conditions by climatologists, people that study the climate. If it's a question in marine science, you get marine biologists. If it's a question in water supplies or how to condense water or how to filter water, you call on the chemists at that time that are trained in that area. When I say people will be assigned, you can't assign a plumber a medical problem. You can do it, but it won't work. So you assign doctors regions. How do you determine that? If there's more cases of cancer in a given area, you equip that hospital with more equipment to treat that cancer, or whatever the disorder is.
But many different disciplines would also be working together more so than they are today.
Oh, yes.
They would understand the overlap of how things work and how it's necessary for very different disciplines to work together, other than being specialists like they are today.
Sorry, something else of note on this. You have to take into account that all of this is volunteer work within a resource-based economy. There is no forced labour. There is no submission to work for to earn a living. Everybody has access to everything that they need as far as the resources to live. So all of this stuff is voluntary. So when someone, when a department is assigned to a specific task, whether it be, a structural engineering department assigned to a task of building a bridge or whatever, that department is made up of the volunteers who have trained in that field within that area or region that would work on those projects.
And maybe I can just add to this as well, because people keep asking me the question, why should they work if they don't have to? It's like, I assume most of you have a hobby or two. Who forces you actually to follow that hobby? No one does. You do it because you're interested in doing so. And it would be the same within the resource-based economy. You do a job because you're interested in doing it. So, but now on to the next question. Do you see the open source revolution as an indication that we are in the preliminary stages of evolving towards a resource-based economy?
Can you repeat that, Sven?
This person is asking whether you see the open source revolution as an indication that we are in the preliminary stages of evolution towards resource-based economy. Whether you can see any link between open source or going open source in so many different areas can also be seen as an indicator that we are striving towards a resource-based economy already.
People are trained to be construction engineers, and that's what they work at. They work at whatever they're trained to be, whatever the profession is that they choose to work in. If they want to become a chemist, they go to special school, become a chemist, then they're assigned by the survey committee where to go and work and render their service. They don't know where to go. All that's under another group of people that assign people to different tasks in different parts of the world.
Okay.
Sorry, Roxanne. I think that was a bit off, that question.
No, I'm letting him know that question now because he has trouble hearing your voice.
All right.
Well, go ahead. I put my finger down.
I don't know what they mean, but I told you people are trained in different fields and they're assigned tasks depending on where the problem is.
Maybe I can rephrase that question.
Wait, Jacques is saying no, open source is not the beginning of a resource-based
No,
economy.
it's not.
You want to expand on that?
I don't need to, because the Venus Project is a worked out system, and it's not something we're fumbling along with. We have a procedural system, and that's, if you agree with the Venus Project, you carry out that procedural system. If you don't, you're outside of the project. We have to stay in accordance with a procedural system. All people want, really, is predictability. And the only way you get predictability is by competency. They may not know they want predictability, but that's what everybody seeks. They want to be able to predict events. When you press the key of a piano, you know what that sound will be. Before you press the key, you know what sound you want. When you operate any musical instrument, you know where you're going. When you operate any procedural system, means you know how to test metals for their compression strength, torsional strength, tension, twist. In other words, you have to use a procedural system to arrive at decisions. So the people that learn how to use a procedural system to arrive at decisions will use those systems. There's nothing done by intuition. There's nothing done by feeling tone. It's always a procedural system. A lifeguard has a procedural system for handling people that are difficult in drowning problems. A fire expert has a procedural system in handling different types of fires. Chemical fires, gasoline fires, wood burning, they have different procedural systems. If they learn all those systems, they are more capable of dealing with a problem.
I think the notion of open source and putting things out there for free has people, within this system, might have people understand the notion of doing things without pay, but it's not the process of the Venus Project. It's not the direction, particularly of the Venus Project.
And in regards to everything else that we covered about open source, I would like to redirect you to the recordings of a seminar, especially the one on November 6th last year. And starting as of minute 34, Jacques, Roxanne, Andrew, and I were elaborating on the open source topic and how the Venus Project views on that.
The open source really doesn't give people a direction or a structure or even value systems and ideas of what we need to do to survive, really. It's working within this system as a reaction, something that doesn't work, and it's trying to enable people to have more information and maybe more physical equipment and able to take care of their own lives and survive. But it doesn't really offer a specific direction and methodology or how to lay out society and how to make it work and how it can be sustainable and how to get rid of the problems that we have today. It doesn't really deal with all that.
Okay, then on to the next question. When the economical collapse would start, how would we manage to preserve the resource-based economy idea? Because the person says there might be other people around with other ideas, how that should be implemented, or how our future should be designed. So how would we preserve our idea behind the Venus Project?
During the transition, if you can convince people that the Venus Project is the most appropriate direction, it'll work. If you can't, it won't work. You just have to learn how to turn people around. And if you don't learn that, you won't be able to establish it. You're going to have to compete with the old established point of view. And if you get enough people to understand the Venus Project, you'll get cooperation. You can't fight people that don't want the Venus Project. If they don't want it, it won't happen. We don't force anybody into anything. We present concepts to them. If they understand, it works. In the old days, a lot of people presented concepts to people, and other people could not understand it, and they would not back the telephone or the airplane. The Wright brothers had to build the airplane themselves. A lot of people don't always understand new ideas. You've got to understand what ingrained social systems are. Established social systems give you established point of view. And so anybody that brings up any argument against the system is subversive. That's a classification. So they make you feel ashamed of thinking of a new system, or they'll give it a label. He's a communist or a socialist. That's a way of discouraging a direction. You can't fight that, but you can educate people out of it if you know how to do that. There will be special training during the transition for people to be able to turn people around. That has changed their way of thinking.
And it is true, during the last Depression, you always talked about that then different people come up and start pushing on soapboxes back to Jesus or different religions or
Yes.
socialism, communism.
It depends on how heavily indoctrinated they are and your ability to change people, which is specialized training. There will be people that will be communicators, but they will not be the people that communicate today. They will be people trained in a new method of communicating with people of divergent points of view.
Okay, do you think people will volunteer in the future to become teachers within the Venus Project, or will education be taught by computers?
Both will be used, computers and teachers. The teachers will have to answer questions of students, which the computer is not always able to do immediately. People can.
Eventually, do you think it'll be mostly computers?
Yes, eventually, yes, they can learn from computers after the transition.
So this person saying last night he was paying attention to a debate about jobs being taken on by machines, and he heard the reply that architects will never be automated.
They said that about the Iceman too, and pilots in trains. They have people operate trains, but at the airport today, the trains are automated. Elevators are automated. The elevator operator's out. And I say that the next 10 years, planes will be flown automatically, like guided missiles. If we can send a rocket to the moon, surely we can fly an airplane from one city to another.
And you see that with architects as well?
Oh, yes, architects are easy to fade out. What's difficult to fade out is creativity. It takes longer. Architect uses pictures of other people's drawings and they elaborate upon them. They rarely offer anything radical. Maybe Bucky Fuller was one of the few radicals that came up with different ideas.
Calatrava?
Calatravas. Santiago Calatravas is a very original designer if you study his works. But most architects do the same thing other architects do. They have very little creativity, although they think they are creative.
So another question in regards to the experimental city. How or when could it happen, and how will it be able to function if the rest of the world is not on the same page as we are? Because we wouldn't have access to all the resources of the world.
First of all, if some particular nation agrees to build the first experimental city, as requested by the Venus Project, if they intend to do that, we can have something to show other people, and they can come and visit it. And if they can come and live there a while in the new city to see if they identify with it. And if they do, to build 3 or 4 in Russia, China, France, England, and see how the system works. And if they like it, they will continue it. If for any reason, whatever it may be, religious or otherwise, if they don't want it, they won't do it. And if they don't do it, you'll have the same problems you have as you have today.
If we get the opportunity to do a city soon, it would be really a transitional city. It would be between two systems. It wouldn't operate as a resource-based economy.
Unless they stick to the Venus Project. I will not build or work on the new city if they will not yield to the directives of the Venus Project.
But it would be done within the monetary system, so it would be between two systems.
It will never be between two systems.
You talked about in the past that a communal, I've heard you mention a community within, could have a community bank.
No,
And
I never did that. You're not right, Roxanne.
maybe I'm not.
No, I would get the country that wants to build an experimental city to do it as an experimental city. It is not between the systems. It has to be in accordance with the Venus Project's procedures. Otherwise, it will not work.
If the city does not have all the materials they need, they would have to trade with the outside.
They can't support it then. It won't work. They have to have access to materials to support the building of a first city.
So is there a person that has a value system that is very close to your value system, apart from those people directly involved into the Venus Project? And who would that be?
Can you repeat that again, Sven?
This person is asking whether there is someone that has a very close value system to your value system, but that is not actively involved in the Venus Project, and who would that be?
I would have no idea. I
don't
know
understand the question either. Yeah.
Okay, let me rephrase that question. The way I understand it is there someone that is of a similar mindset than you are, but not directly involved into the Venus Project? So apart from the Venus Project, is there anyone that comes close to the same ideas that you actually have?
I've never met anybody that has. I have, everybody tells me, gee, I think just as you do. So I ask them questions, and they do not.
This person is asking for you to confirm that there's going to be an interview next Tuesday with Lilu Mace.
Yes, we do have one scheduled Tuesday at 11, and I think she said that it will be recorded, and they usually put it up a day or two afterwards, so I don't know the details as to when it's going up. But they did ask us for an interview.
This person's asking how distribution would be handled, distribution of resources would be handled up until we have the technology to produce abundance.
How would distribution of resources be handled up to when we have an abundance of resources, of materials and products?
There's a group of people in the Venus Project that would be called the planners. The planners plan the city based on what's available, not what they hope would be available.
What about distribution of resources?
Those nations that join together will share resources. There will be many nations that will not join due to their background, whatever. But the nations that do join together do it under the condition that they share resources. Otherwise, you cannot establish the Venus Project.
I don't know if that answers their question, or if they have something specific with distribution of resources.
It was very general, that question, so there were no details. So if that question wasn't properly answered, please get back to me and rephrase or revise your question, please. But now going on to the next one. This person is referring to the experiments you did with birds, where you actually try to figure out by what drives a mother bird to feed their breed. And he's asking, or you said basically that the one that moves the most gets the most. And did you try that on other species or other birds?
About 2 or 3 different species of birds. They all seem to react more or less in a similar fashion.
Can you describe that for people who weren't familiar with that?
Okay. You know, birds land in the nest with a worm or some food, And the bird that opens its mouth the widest and moves a great deal, they drop the food in. The bird that is not aggressively hungry, they do not feed as well. So I made a model of a bird that moved more than the real bird with a wider mouth, and they go put the worms in that bird, which was made of plastic. So birds respond to stimuli. They don't respond to feeding their young.
Motherly instinct.
There's the motherly instincts, all those words. That's the artificiality of science.
Survival of the species.
Yeah. Well, all those things are very different. In other words, I try to tell people over and over again, I'm going to tell you once more, see if you can make the connection. If I find a girl that looks like your wife and get her as near a duplicate as I can get her to hug another person and tell the husband that the wife is has been dishonest, and he can see that at a distance, he will go home and beat his wife, although his wife has done nothing terrible. Or if you can simulate a similar condition, you can generate optimal behavior. Whatever behavior you generate can be done. People do not react to the real world. They react to their projections of the real world. If they understood how their government worked, they'd throw them out. They don't understand those things. So they react the way the government sets up the values. In other words, all the broadcasting companies in America, there are 4 major companies that control the values of broadcasting. GE owns NBC, so they're not about to tell you anything that's wrong with GE.
Or war.
Don't you see
They
that?
make a lot of money in war.
There's a lot of money made selling military equipment, aircraft carriers, submarines, battleships. War is big business and nothing more. The only reason we invade another country is we perceive them as a threat to our value system, or they have resources that we want. We don't go there to bring democracy. I hate to shatter your ideals, but I'm telling you that the world is very, very poorly informed.
Okay, this person is asking where do you get your inspiration from and who influenced your point of view during your lifetime?
Well, a little bit from many different books and many different experiments that I read about.
And did yourself. And the experiments that you did.
All the experiments I've done to help me understand. I didn't understand a lot of things, so I had to do experiments to help determine which the most probable condition is. Either man invented the wheel or a tree fell over another tree, and the men that pulled the tree over caused the bottom tree to roll. I do not believe people invent the wheel. I believe the wheel was discovered by one log rolling over another. I don't believe man invents anything.
And where you got your inspiration from? I mean, I don't know if you want to
I got my inspiration from books like Mind in the Making, Semantics, books on the history of invention, many books that dealt with aspects of reality, some aspects of reality. But a lot of books are romantic. When you read about inventors, they talk about how the invention, how many experiments they did, but they don't tell you just where they got the ideas from because they don't know. People don't know. Remember this. Most people in America, I can only talk about us, most people in America don't know how their refrigerator works. They don't know how their lights work. They don't even know what an electric circuit is. And so you can't even talk to most people about anything physical because they say, well, I'm not technical. And anything that's not technical cannot solve any problems. There's nothing but technology. Everything that you have today in your home, your washing machine, your refrigerator, your electric line, they're all technical. A politician never gave us anything. I'll repeat that. A politician never gave us anything. Because they can't tell you how to grow food faster. They can't tell you how to make transportation better. They know nothing about any of the essentials that operate a society.
And also, most people try and, if they invent in little disciplines, and no one, hardly anyone, looks at what the problem is. You grew up in the Depression, things were very bad, and you questioned the system that made it that way, and then started a hunt of what a more appropriate system would be to eliminate those problems. People don't think outside of the system. They try and fix it within.
They can't.
Yeah, they're given patriotism and devotion to their system. Right.
All the war heroes, all heroes that drop bombs on cities, they're given medals, so kids want to join the army and achieve some of that notoriety. We make war sound awful, and that's what it is. It's a poor solution. It isn't even a solution. It makes the problem worse. Killing other people only generates hatred over the years.
I think that's acceptable. It's entertainment, war today on TV.
Oh, yeah. All movies on war do not show people blown in smithereens. They don't show people blown apart. They don't show the horrors of war. They just show the glory. They're artificial, deceptive, false, irrelevant. Nothing to do with religion. The Bible says thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say you can kill on Wednesdays and Thursdays. The Bible says love your enemy. The Bible says judge not lest you be judged. They don't want you to judge other people because you don't know what the conditions are that made them that way. Yet you all do jury duty. I would never do jury duty. I would never judge another human being. And the Bible also says, there but for the grace of God go I, meaning that you could have been that person. So maybe a serial killer is made by society. Maybe murderers and thieves are made by society, by social conditions. I don't believe you're born that way. No one is born good or bad. They're born with a clean slate. They're made that way by the society they're brought up in.
Right, as a bottom line, I'd say do not forget that you cannot alter a system by the means by which it was created, because taking the same means that were used to create the system will end up having the same system again. So you have to rethink and basically try to think outside of the system to arrive at proper solution, not to fix it, but to come up with an alternative solution to replace it.
It has to be a workable solution. And if it's not workable, it just won't work. It'll revert back. People cannot think outside of their culture unless they're indoctrinated by someone else. A book, a challenge of ideas, not debate, but dialogue. In a debate, you try to win. Dialogue, you try to understand.
A lot of people don't know even where the cause of the problems comes from.
They think they're born that way.
Yeah, they put it on the individual instead of putting it on the monetary system and the values that are inculcated to support that system.
It's like arresting a person for speaking French. If they're brought up in an environment where they only speak French, that's all they can do. If they're brought up in a highly criminal environment, that's all they can do. It's very difficult for people to question their social institutions unless they travel quite a bit and read a great many different books with different points of view. If the Venus Project is established, we will have what people believe in all over the world. All kinds of religions we will have on Sunday. Belief and non-belief, atheism, agnosticism, every type of thing. That's a democracy. But when you just have religion on Sunday, that's thought control. Whenever you have our point of view only on television. That's thought control or managed news. In other words, if our president criticizes another country, we would invite that country on to give their point of view so that the public is informed. That's a democracy. It's not a democracy when you have military people on television of our country only, giving our point of view only. That is not a democracy. That's a dictatorship of one kind or another. When you go to work for any industry, when you punch that time clock, it's a dictatorship. You do what the industry assigns you to do. They don't ask you, what would you like to do?
I got a little confused there. You said our point of view. You were talking about United States point of view then.
Oh,
Not-
the same.
right, yeah.
Currently, much of our entertainment revolves around competition, as seen in the nature of our sports. How do you see entertainment evolving in a culture in which values are based around collaboration rather than competition?
Yes, I see that the people that work in different fields choose those professions, and they get their entertainment by making the world a better place for all people.
Because entertainment would be used to help people solve problems.
You don't need that.
They give them
Entertainment
understanding.
will be set aside. Instead, they will solve problems and feel good because they put an end to war, poverty, hunger, prisons, police. All those things that offend people will be solved if they learn how to face problems and identify what they are and what generates behavior. We can generate any kind of behavior, assuming that the human behavior is lawful. I think that everything is lawful. There's natural law involved in everything. And man-made laws are artificial. That's why they're violated.
And thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Jack and Roxanne, for being here with us and answering all our questions.
Thank you for the opportunity. We deeply appreciate it.
Yes, thanks everyone for showing up, and we'll speak with you next week.
I hope.